Welcome to RecoveryWorks Excel 1 Part 1. Using Excel, you can create documents such as budgets, address lists, and calendars. In Excel 1 Part 1, the course concepts are learning how to enter, edit, and manage Excel data, as well as how to create simple formulas. Let's begin by launching Excel. On your desktop, look for the Excel icon. It's identified by the large green X. Your icon is most likely in a different position than mine, but once you find it, point to it and double-click. Let's talk about the Excel screen. We'll start at the top left. At the top left is the Quick Access toolbar. And just like its name indicates, this toolbar is used for frequently used commands that we need to quickly access. For example, if I hover my mouse over the Save button, and you can do the same, a screen tip displays. This indicates that this is called the Save button, and it has a shortcut, Control-S, to make it even faster to use. We'll talk more about the button and the shortcut as we continue through the class. Notice at the top, it indicates that you are currently in Microsoft Excel and you're working in a workbook. Right now we haven't given the workbook a name, but as we create data, we'll save that data. As we move down the screen, notice that there are tabs such as File, Home, and Insert. The Home tab is active. That's indicated because it's a lighter color than the other tabs. Each tab contains a ribbon, and inside the ribbon are groups such as Clipboard, Font, and Alignment. And each of those groups are buttons, and we can use those buttons to access commands while we're working in Excel. For this course, we will primarily be working in the Home tab and the File tab. As I move down the screen, I see A1 displayed. That is called a cell reference, and this area that the cell reference displays in is called the name box. In just a moment, we'll talk more about cell references. This next area is called the formula bar, and as we begin entering data, which can be text or numbers, into Excel, that data will display and can be edited in the formula bar. Notice that columns display with letter names such as A, B, C, as well as rows with numbers such as 1, 2, 3. The small rectangles that display in Excel are called cells. Each cell has a name which is called a cell reference, and the cell reference is the intersection of this column and the row. So for example, when you begin working in Excel, cell A1 is active. Notice the cursor in this area of Excel looks like a white plus sign. This is the selection cursor in Excel. Take your selection cursor and click on cell B2. Remember, that's the intersection of column B and row 2. Notice when you change the selection, the cell name changes in the name box to B2, and you can tell that that cell is selected because it has a selection box around it. Let's go ahead and move back to cell A1 by clicking with our selection cursor. Moving to the bottom of the sheet, we can see Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3 displayed. Excel files are called workbooks, and each workbook has 3 sheets. When you begin working in Excel, you'll be working with Sheet 1, and you can see that's the active sheet because it is a lighter color. When you take Excel 2, you'll find that you can add additional sheets to Excel as well as renaming the sheets. As we move over to the right, we see that there is a scroll bar, a vertical scroll bar on the right, as well as a horizontal scroll bar on the bottom. Scroll bars are needed when information that you want to see is not displayed on the screen. For purposes of this class, we will not need to use the scroll bars, but as you continue to take Excel classes, you will learn how to use the scroll bars to display data. Notice the Normal button towards the bottom right of the screen. We are in normal mode, and that is indicated because the button has yellow shading behind it. We will stay in normal mode throughout this course. There are two other ways to view our data in Excel, but for this course where we are learning how to edit and manage data and create simple formulas, we will stay in normal view. And finally, notice there is a zoom control. Your zoom is currently at 100%, and for your work today, you'll be able to stay in 100%. But as you learn more about Excel, if you do need to zoom in or out, notice there is a zoom out control as well as a zoom in control, or there's a slider bar that you could use for zooming. So that's the basic part of your screen with Excel. The first thing I'm going to teach you about Excel is how to select. It's important to know how to select in Excel because once you have entered data into Excel, you may need to format it in some way. For example, you may need to add or delete a column or a row. Or you may want particular text to stand out from the rest of the text, so you might add bold formatting to the text. In addition, you may need to format numbers. After you've entered numbers, you can quickly format the numbers in ways such as adding percentages or dollar signs. We're just going to be practicing selecting right now. And once we understand those techniques, then we'll be able to start creating a worksheet by inputting data into Excel. We've already talked about selecting a cell. We know that to select a cell, we use the selection cursor, which looks like a white plus sign. A1 is currently selected. Go ahead and use your selection cursor to choose C5. Notice when you change the selection, the name changes in the name box. You can also select a block or a range of cells, and that simply means more than one cell. Let's practice selecting range A3 through C5. Begin by clicking in A3 and then making sure you're using the selection cursor. Drag to column C by pressing and holding down your left mouse button, and then drag down to row 5. Then release your left mouse button. You have now selected a range A3 through C5. And remember, right now we are just practicing, but the purpose of understanding this is once you have data in Excel, you might need to select that data and change its formatting in some way. I want you to notice that all of the cells except for cell A3 are shaded. A3 is still part of the selection, but A3 is the active cell, meaning that if we were to start typing data right now, that data would be entered into the active cell, which is cell A3. Let's practice selecting another range. This time, let's select range B8 through D11. To begin, click in cell B8, press and hold down, and then move to cell D11. And you have now selected that range. Notice when I selected the second range, the first range was deselected. If you need to select more than one range, after you've selected the first range, you can press and hold the Control key on your keyboard to select the second range. The Control key on your keyboard is at the bottom left. Let's go ahead and try that. So with this range selected, let's select range G2 through I5. To begin, make sure you press and hold down the Control key on your keyboard. Next, move to cell G2 and keeping the Control key pressed down, press and hold the left mouse button and then drag to I5. Next, release both the mouse button and the Control key. You can see now you have selected both of the ranges. To deselect a range or ranges, go ahead and click on any blank cell. Next, Let's learn how to select a column. For example, let's say that we wanted to delete a column from a worksheet where we had entered data. To select a column, go ahead and move to the letter of the column, for example, D. Move to the very top until you see a down pointing arrow. When you see the down pointing arrow, you know you're in column selection mode. So go ahead and click, and you've now selected that column. Now, if you want to select more than one column, for example, if I wanted to select columns D and E, I will drag across the columns. Let's try this. You already have column D selected. Press and hold down with your left mouse button and drag over to E, and you've now selected 2 columns. Let's unselect our selection. Remember to do that. Move to a blank cell and click. Let's use the same technique we used to select columns to select rows. To select a row, move to a row, for example, row 2, move just to the left until you see the right pointing arrow, and then click, and you've now selected a row. Using the same technique we used to select more than one column, press and hold down to select multiple rows, such as row 2 and 3. To unselect, go ahead and click on a blank cell. As you take this course, if you need to review anything, remember you can always stop the course, rewind, and listen again until you understand the concepts, and then you can return to the course. Now let's go ahead and learn how to enter data into a worksheet. Make sure you click in cell A1 to select that. Today we're going to create information on a worksheet, and it's going to be data for January and February and March for salespeople in our company to keep track of their sales. To begin, let's type the abbreviation for January, JAN. Now, once you have typed that, you'll want to confirm that entry by pressing the Enter key on your keyboard. Notice when you do that, it moves you down to the next cell in the column. But if you're typing information in a column, you're going to key each entry and then press Enter to move down in the column. Keep your zoom at 100%. I'm going to increase my zoom so that you can better see the data on my screen. Now, what if you wanted to edit the contents of a cell? Let's say that I've decided instead of the abbreviation for January, I want to spell out the whole word January. To do that, you'll need to be in edit mode. Go ahead and click back in cell A1. The formula bar, where I'm moving my mouse right now, is one place that you can use to edit text. When you are working in Excel or any other Office program, when you are in the text edit mode, your cursor will display as an I-beam. And you can see that's how my mouse cursor displays in the formula bar, and yours will also display that way. So once you've moved into the formula bar and the I-beam cursor displays, click at the end of JAN. When you see the flashing insertion point, you are ready to edit. So now go ahead and finish the word January by adding the letters UARY. Once you have completed that entry, make sure you press Enter. There's another way that you can edit data. So let's go back and click on cell A1. Let's say that we have changed our mind again, and we now want this text in the cell to read January report. You could return to the formula bar to do that, but an alternate that I like, and I think it's a little bit of a time saver, is simply to double click into the cell. Notice that once I do that, I see the I-beam and I see the insertion point, and now I'm in edit mode. So now I can go ahead and press the space bar and add report. And I want you to notice that once the flashing insertion point is displayed, it really doesn't matter where your mouse I-beam is. You can go ahead and move it out of the way. The I-beam is used to click in order to display the insertion point. But the insertion point is what is important when you're editing. That shows you where you are going to begin your editing. Now remember, once you have made this edit, press Enter to confirm, and remember that takes you down the column. What are some other things you need to know about editing? You should understand that you can also replace the contents of a cell. Let's go back and click in A1. Remember, we began with JAN, and then we made some edits to that. We made the word January, and then we added the word report. If we have decided that we want to completely replace the contents of this, so let's say, for example, we now have changed our mind and we've decided we want A1 to display as the abbreviation for February. It's very easy to replace the contents of a cell. When that cell is selected, you simply type over it. So you'll type FEB and then press enter. Right? So just as a review, if you want to edit, you click on the cell, and you can do that either in the formula bar or you can double click. But to replace contents, you click on the cell and you simply type over that cell. It's also important to understand how to delete the contents of a cell. To delete the contents of a cell, you'll need to use the delete key on your keyboard. On your keyboard, you'll notice 4 arrow keys, and then you'll notice 6 small keys above those arrow keys. Now, if you're working on a laptop, you may find that those keys may be in a different position, but you're looking for the delete key, and that key will either have the whole word delete, or it may just have the letters DEL. But once you find that, and you make sure that you have selected the cell that you want to delete, in this case we're using A1, you'll press the delete key, and then the contents are gone. Undo and redo. It's also important to understand undo and redo. While you're editing data in your worksheet, you may change your mind. Instead of retyping information, you can move to the Quick Access toolbar. So if you'll go ahead and do that, and then move to the Undo key. I want you to notice the Undo key is the arrow that points to the left. You'll know that you're at the Undo key because when you hover your mouse over, you'll see a screen tip, and it's going to say Undo, and then it's going to list the last action you've performed. So in this case, it says Undo Clear. Let's go ahead and press that Undo key and notice that the last action that you performed has now been reversed. If you click the small arrow to the right of the Undo key, you will see a list of the actions you've performed. So for example, if I wanted to go back to display when I had keyed January in A1, I could click and it would go ahead and undo that. Undo is very handy as you're working in a program. It's a big time saver. Remember to use undo. You simply move to the undo key in the Quick Access toolbar. So as we work through the course, you can go ahead and practice that. Now your screen may look a bit different than mine right now, and that's okay. Let's go ahead and clear all of our data. Go ahead and click on cell A1 and then press the delete key. Let's learn some other ways to input data. To begin, let's practice entering text as we did in the last section by keying January and pressing enter. Notice when you key text, the text is left aligned. Let's key a number. Key 100. You can either use the number pad at the right-hand side of your keyboard, or you can use the number keys on the top row. Okay. So notice that when text is keyed in Excel, it's left aligned. When numbers are keyed in Excel, they're right aligned. Next, let's learn how to enter a date in cell A3. When entering dates in Excel, you want to key the numbers with a slash separating the month, the day, and the year. And you will only need to key the last 2 digits of the year, not all 4 digits. Let's key January 1st, 2018. To do that, key 01 slash 01 slash 18 and press enter. Notice the date is formatted for you. The default date format now displays. Default means the standard in a program. In Excel 1 Part 2, you'll learn how to format text, numbers, and dates if you decide you do not want to follow the default formatting. Let's delete the information in cells A1 through A3. Select those cells and then press the delete key and click on cell A1. Next, let's learn a feature called autofill. Autofill is a feature that allows you to quickly enter text that is in some type of sequence. For example, months of the year or days of the week. Let's begin with days of the week. Type the abbreviation for January, JAN. Move your mouse to the autofill handle at the bottom right of the cell. Note that the pointer changes to a plus sign when you move your mouse pointer over the autofill handle. Once the autofill handle displays, press and hold down on the left mouse button and drag across the row until you get to column E. Next, release the mouse button. You can now see that you've quickly used the autofill command to fill months of the year. Let's practice again. This time, let's key the whole word January. Next, let's practice using autofill. This time, key the whole name of the month January. To use autofill, remember to move to the bottom right of the cell and make sure the autofill handle displays. Once that displays, move your mouse over to column E and you can see that autofill has filled in the months. We are only filling the months into May. If you continue dragging, you could create months for the whole year. Next, click on cell A5 and type Monday. Use the autofill handle and drag across to E, and that's an example of using autofill to autofill days of the week. Notice that part of the word Wednesday is cut off. In Excel 1 Part 2, you'll learn how easy it is to change column widths. For now, we'll leave that the way it is. Click in cell A7. Next, we'll learn how to use autofill for a sequence of numbers. For example, if I wanted to number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or if I wanted to number in increments of 5, such as 5, 10, 15, 20. Our technique is going to be the same, but when we input a sequence of numbers, we'll need to set up the pattern, so we'll need to type information in at least 2 cells. For example, if I key the number 1 into cell A7, note when I use autofill, it simply repeats the number 1. In order to create a pattern, I'll need to set up that pattern in the first 2 cells. Click in cell A9, key 1. Because we are entering data in a row, we need to press the Tab key on the keyboard. That's to the left of the letter Q. Notice that enters the information in cell A9 and moves us to B9. Next, key 2 and press Tab. To continue this number pattern using autofill, use your selection cursor to select 1 and 2. Next, move your mouse to the autofill handle at the bottom of 2. Let's drag this till we get all the way to 10, and that will take us to column J. Here's an example where now we cannot see all of our data. Let's scroll to the left by moving our mouse pointer to the selection bar and pressing and holding down and moving over. Next, click on cell A11. Let's try autofill with a pattern of 5, 10, 15, 20. Remember, when you are using autofill for numbers and you're creating a pattern, you must put that pattern in the first 2 cells. So you'll key 5 and then press Tab and type 10 and press Tab. Next, you'll select both cells. You'll move to the autofill handle in the second cell, and then you will drag. And let's click on cell A12 to unselect. Practice using autofill until you really understand it, because autofill will save you a lot of time as you're working in Excel. Next, we'll learn about a feature in Excel called autocomplete. Click on cell A13. Let's create a list of 3 items. To begin, type paper, press enter. Next, type ruler, press enter, and then type eraser and press enter. Autocomplete is a feature in Microsoft that remembers entries that you have previously typed, because you may need to key those entries again. So for example, if I want to enter the word ruler into A16, as soon as I begin typing that word, Excel will fill the word in for me, and that is the autocomplete feature. Go ahead and type the letter R and notice that the word ruler appears as part of the autocomplete feature. If you want to input ruler, which in this case we do, press enter. Next, let's key paper using the autocomplete feature. So key just the letter P, paper will appear, and you'll press enter. Let's input another P word to see how autocomplete will work if you have more than one word beginning with the same letter. Key pencil and press enter. In cell A19, key the letter P. Notice that nothing happens. This is because you have 2 words that begin with the letter P. So autocomplete will not assist you in filling in this word until you have typed the second letter. I'm going to go ahead, and you can too. Let's type the E, and notice that once we've done that, autocomplete will function and we can press enter. So autocomplete is another time saver. And if you had a very long list and you had several words that started with P or R or E, it would work just the same way. It would allow you to key in the first letter or letters of a word, and then it would fill in for you. Now notice if you don't want to use the autocomplete feature, if I typed PE because I was going to type pen, if I do not want autocomplete to fill in pencil, I simply type the N, and then I can press the delete key on my keyboard. So I can use autocomplete, but I don't have to use autocomplete. Next, let's talk about how to enter a range of data into cells. Click on cell A22. Let's create a short report with John and Mary's sales for January and February. It's a time saver in Excel if you know how many cells you'll be using to select the range first before keying. Before we work on this together, if you'll watch my screen, I will demonstrate to you why it's important to select your range before you start. I'm going to type the data in without selecting the range to demonstrate that selecting a range is the quickest, most efficient way to enter data in Excel. I'll begin by typing report, then pressing enter, then typing John, pressing enter, and typing Mary, and pressing enter. Because I haven't selected a range, now when I'm ready to key the heading for column B, I have to take my mouse and click, then I can type the heading and continue down the column. Next, if I want to key in C, the February column heading, I'll have to take my mouse and click, and then key. So notice that each time I begin a new column, I have to click. Let's work together to put the same data in, but select a range first. By selecting the range first, we will not have to click with the mouse. Let's select the range A26 through C28. Click A26, make sure you have your selection cursor, which is the plus sign, and drag through C and then down to 28. So now we've selected the range A26 through C28. A26 is your active cell. At this point, you don't want to click, you just want to begin typing. When you begin typing, your data will be input into cell A26. We're going to type this in columns. Begin typing by keying report, press enter, Next, key John and then Mary. Next, because we have this in a range, to move to the January column heading, press Enter. Notice, because the range is selected, by pressing Enter, you will move to the next cell that you want to enter. This avoids having to click with the mouse. Let's finish this worksheet. Remember, after you type 150, press your Enter key. We'll then key the February heading and continue. And when we're done, we'll press Enter. So remember that selecting a range in advance will save you time because you will not have to click your mouse at the beginning of each new heading. So that is how to enter data into a range of cells. So you've learned the basics of entering data in Excel. Next, let's learn how to save the data you've created. Let's begin by moving to the top of the Excel worksheet. A quick way to move to the top of the worksheet without having to use the scroll bar is to use the shortcut key Control Home. So Control Home will move to the top of the worksheet. We've created data in this worksheet, but we haven't saved the worksheet. The computer uses memory to display the information, but it's important to understand that if you close this file now without saving the file, all of the data that you keyed would be lost. Let's go ahead and save this data. If you'll be using a flash drive today, you'll want to go ahead and insert the flash drive now. I'll go ahead and insert my flash drive. If you don't have a flash drive, you can save to the Documents library. One of the quickest ways to save a file is using the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar. Move your mouse to the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar and click. Notice when we click the Save button, a Save As dialog box appears. The Save As dialog box will allow us to navigate to our flash drive to save it to the flash drive, as well as to give the workbook a file name. Notice that Documents is selected in Libraries. If you don't have a flash drive, you can save to the Documents library on your computer. If you have a flash drive, you'll need to scroll down to the Computer section and find the flash drive. Note that in order to find the flash drive, the Computer section will need to be expanded. If your Computer section is collapsed, it will only display the word Computer, and you'll have to click on the triangle next to it to display the flash drive, and the flash drive will be listed at the bottom of the list. Your flash drive most likely has a different name and is followed by a different letter than mine, but it will be displayed at the bottom of the computer list. You'll want to click in order to save to the flash drive. Next, let's save this with a file name. Click anywhere on the word Book. Once that's selected, you can type over it without having to press backspace or delete. Let's call this file My First Excel. And once you've named it, you'll move your mouse to the Save button and click. Notice that because we've named this, it is now called My First Excel instead of Book. Let's close this file. To close the file, move to the File tab and then click Close. You're still in Excel, but you do not have a workbook displayed. To create a new workbook, click on the File tab and then click New. Next, move to Blank Workbook and double-click. We now have a blank workbook to work with. Let's go ahead and enter data into a workbook. The information will contain text and numbers, and after we've entered the numbers, we'll learn how to create simple formulas. You may keep your zoom at 100%. I'm going to increase my zoom so you can more clearly see the data I'm keying. Let's begin by selecting the range that we'll input data into. Click on cell A1 and using the plus sign selection cursor, select through B5. A1 is the active cell. We don't need to type any information into A1. Let's press the Enter key to move to A2, We're going to type 3 salespeople's names. Let's begin with John. Press enter. Next, key Mary. Press enter. And finally, key Steve. Press enter. And we're going to total their sales in this row. Let's key total. If your typing speed is slower than mine, remember you can always stop the course and then key at your own pace and come back to the course when you've caught up. When you reach the bottom of column A, to continue to the top of column B, because we've selected a range, press enter. In this cell, we'll key the abbreviation for January, JAN, press enter, and here's where we'll key the numbers in for the data. And there's our worksheet. Notice that we're leaving cell B5 blank. We're going to sum the numbers for January sales for John, Mary, and Steve. To do that, we are going to learn about formulas. To unselect the data, once you've keyed it, click in a blank cell. Let's save this file before we learn about formulas. The shortcut key to save files, which will work in Excel and any other Windows program, is Control S. S for save. It's a good idea to learn the basic shortcut keys as you're learning about computers because it will save you time. Control S. Now notice, because during this work session I have navigated to my flash drive to indicate that that is where I want to save, I do not have to navigate to the flash drive again. As I continue working in Excel, the files will automatically save when I am in the Save As dialog box to the flash drive. When I close Excel and come back into Excel, it will return to the default, which is the Documents folder. But because I previously saved a file to the flash drive, it is still navigated to the flash drive. But I do need to change the file name. Notice that book is already selected and file name. You can simply type over that, and we'll call this My Sales Data. When you name files, make sure you give it a specific enough name that when you go back to look for it, you'll be able to find it. So you want the names to be short, but also very specific so that you can find the file again when you look for it. To finish this process, you'll click Save. Let's learn about simple formulas in Excel. This is an example of a simple formula in Excel. Think of Excel as being like an online calculator that allows you to easily calculate the numbers in your Excel worksheet. An Excel simple formula always starts with an equal sign, and it always has to have an operator. For example, a plus sign. Notice that the formula also contains operands such as A and B. Those are the numbers that the operator is working with. In Excel, when a simple formula is created, you'll use cell references as the operands. Remember, a formula always begins with an equal sign, always has an operator, such as plus, and in Excel, we'll use cell reference names. So for example, if I wanted to add cells A1 and A2, my formula would be keyed in as equals A1 plus A2. In this example, the cell references are keyed in uppercase, but in a formula, cell references can be keyed as either uppercase or lowercase. We've already discussed the addition operator. There are other operators that are used in Excel, such as subtraction, multiplication, indicated by an asterisk, division, indicated by a slash, and percents and exponents, although in this class we will not be using percents or exponents. Here are other examples of using operators in Excel simple formulas. Remember, a formula always starts with an equal sign and uses cell references and an operator. So, For example, if I wanted to add A1 and A2, the formula would be equals A1 plus A2. If I wanted to subtract B3 from C1, the formula would be equals C1 minus B3. If I wanted to divide D4 by C3, the formula would be equals D4 divided by C3. And finally, if I wanted to multiply A5 by A6, the formula would be equals A5 asterisk, which represents multiplication, A6. Let's try this in Excel. Make sure your active cell is cell B5. Let's add cells B2, which represent John's sales, B3, which represents Mary's sales, and B4, which represents Steve's sales. Remember, a formula always starts with an equal sign. Begin by pressing the equal sign. Next, key the cell reference. Let's just go ahead and key it in lowercase. John's January sales reference is represented by B2, so key B2. That is your first operand. Next, key the operator, which is plus, and then key the next cell reference. The next cell reference is Mary's sales, so let's key B3, key the operator, plus, and finally key the last cell reference, Steve's sales, B4. So your formula should look just like mine, beginning with an equal sign, containing operands and operators. So our formula is equals B2 plus B3 plus B4, and you'll finally confirm this by pressing enter. And the answer will be 610. Let's enter this formula in another way. I want to show you the way that you can click to enter the formula. We're going to erase the formula we just created. So click on cell B5 and press the delete key. Another way that you can enter a formula, which is a bit of a time saver, is to point to the cell references instead of keying them. To begin the formula, press the equal sign. Instead of keying B2, click on cell B2. And notice that it will go ahead and display that. Next, type the operator, plus. Take your mouse next and click on cell B3 for Mary's sales. Type the operator, plus, and then click on Steve's sales. Those are B4. And if you're sure your formula matches mine, equals B2 plus B3 plus B4, press enter, and you'll get the same result. We are using cell references as our operands in Excel. We're doing that because that way, if the information changes in the cells, the formula will update. For example, if you click on cell B3, which now displays as 230, and change that data, let's change it to 330 and press enter. Note that the formula updates, and that is the reason that we use cell references. Let's change that back by moving to the undo key and clicking, and now that displays as 230. Click on cell B5, and now let's learn about another way that we could add the numbers in a column. Functions are used to simplify formulas. Functions are predefined formulas that perform calculations. A function begins with the function name followed by parentheses. For example, the sum function adds numbers, the max function finds the largest number, the min function finds the smallest number, the average function finds the average. The count function counts the number of cells that contain numbers. The count A function counts the number of cells that are not empty. In this course, you'll learn how to use the sum, max, min, and average function. In the worksheet we're currently working with, I'll begin by teaching you the sum function. Notice that a function always starts with an equal sign, and then the function name, followed by what we call the arguments, within the parentheses. So once again, just to review, a function includes an equal sign, the function name, an opening parentheses, arguments, and a closing parentheses. The simplest way to insert an Excel function is with the AutoSum button in the editing group. Let's try this in our worksheet. Make sure cell B5 is the active cell. Next, move your mouse pointer to the AutoSum button in the editing group. You want to make sure you do not click the arrow, but instead click the AutoSum button. Once you've clicked that AutoSum button, the sum function is automatically inserted for you. It begins with the equal sign, the function, the opening parentheses, the arguments, and the closing parentheses. Notice that because the active cell is at the bottom of a column, it will automatically add the numbers in the column as the arguments. To finish the function, you'll press the Enter key. I've shown you 3 ways to add the column. Note that the AutoSum function is the easiest way, and that is the way that I would recommend using. I'm going to use autofill to copy the sum function from one cell to another cell. You'll notice that we'll be using relative references. A relative reference refers to the concept in Excel that when a formula is copied, cell references are based on their position relative to the formula's cell location. To begin, we'll click in cell C1 and enter data for February sales. Key February. Next, key the numbers. First 280, then 150, then 270. Press Enter and make sure the active cell is cell C5. Instead of using AutoSum to create a function, we'll simply use autofill to copy the function from cell B5 to C5. Click on cell B5 and remember to use your autofill handle. The autofill handle must display at the bottom right as a plus sign. Next, press and hold down and drag to copy the formula. Click in cell C5. This is an example of a relative reference. In Excel, when a formula is copied, it will copy and the arguments will display relative to the cell that you have input the formula into. If I look at the formula bar, my function for cell C5 begins with the equal sign and then the function name, which is sum. In the parentheses, notice that the arguments are C2 through C4 because my active cell is in column C. Clicking back on column B, I can see that the function looks the same. It equals sum, but in the parentheses, the arguments are B2 through B4 because I am in column B. More often than not, you'll want to use relative references as you copy formulas in Excel. There may be instances where you will want to use absolute instead of relative references. Excel absolute references. Use absolute references if you do not want the cell references adjusted when a formula is copied. For example, a unit price or a sales tax rate. In this example, I'm keeping track of payment for classes. Because the class price does not change, the class price in cell B8 should be entered as an absolute reference. So notice, to determine the class price, the formula begins with an equal sign and then calculates the attendance of each class, for example B3, times the class price B8. Because the class price contained in cell B8 will not change in the formula, B8 is entered as an absolute reference. In order to identify a cell as an absolute reference, you'll simply press the F4 key, which will add dollar signs to the cell references. Let's go ahead and delete the February column by selecting using the selection cursor and then pressing Enter. Next, let's type the heading Sales, key Unit Price, and then press the Tab key and type 45, and then press Enter. We are going to create a formula that is going to calculate each person's sales. So for example, John sold 200 units and each unit is priced at 45. Let's click in cell C2. Remember, our formula will begin with an equal sign, so key equals. If we are going to calculate John's sales, we need to key the cell reference for John's sales. That's B2. We are going to multiply that by the unit price, which is B7. So we'll type the asterisk for our multiplication sign, and then we'll key B7. Because we want that unit price to be an absolute reference, that will not change relative to our formula. The next step is to press the F4 function key at the top of your keyboard. Once you do that, notice that dollar signs are added, and that indicates that that is an absolute reference. Your formula should read equals B2 times absolute B7. Remember, by pressing the F4 function key, the absolute signs were added. Next, press the Enter key. Click back on cell C2, and instead of having to rekey this formula, we can copy it using autofill. Remember, you must move to the autofill handle until the plus sign displays. Drag that down, and we have now copied the formula. Let's look at the formula. We already know that in cell C2, our formula is equals B2 times absolute B7. It will always multiply by the unit price. Click in C3, look at your formula bar. Notice that we have both relative and absolute references. Equals B3 relative to where our formula is, we'll move 1 to the left, which is B3. Then we will multiply by absolute B7. Click on Steve's sales and notice that formula moves 1 to the left, so it's equals B4 times absolute reference unit price 45. Finally, if we click in C5, we can see that that formula is equals B5 times absolute value B7. This may be a section of the class that you may want to review to really understand relative and absolute references. Let's talk more about function names. We have used the sum function. Let's learn how to use other functions using the AutoSum button. Before we do that, let's save the My Sales Data worksheet. We have made changes to this worksheet, and we are going to go ahead and save over the original worksheet with the changes we've made. To do that, simply press Control S, and you will save the changes you've made. So as you are working in worksheets, as you make changes to the worksheet, make sure you save those changes by pressing Control S. To learn about functions, we're going to modify our worksheet. To do that, go ahead and delete the information in column C by selecting that data and pressing Delete, and then delete unit price information by selecting A7 and B7 and pressing Delete. We have used the AutoSum button, remember that's here in the editing group, in order to create a sum function. If we click the drop-down arrow, we will see that there are other functions. Let's go ahead and try the average and the max and the min function. To do that, let's add some data to our worksheet. Click on cell A7 and key the largest number is. Next, press Enter and key the smallest number is. And then finally, press Enter and in cell A9, key the average number is. Before we begin, let's go ahead and delete the total information in cell A5 and B5 and then press Delete. Next, click on cell D7. We are going to use a function. Remember, a function is a name that makes creating a formula easier. And the easiest way to create a function is by using the AutoSum button. So like I said, make sure D7 is the active cell. Click on the arrow next to AutoSum. Now we are looking for the function that will find the largest number, and that function is max. Go ahead and move to max and click. Notice what happens is that the function is created, equals max with an opening and closing parentheses. We need to choose the arguments. We need to choose the data that we want to use as our argument to find the largest number. We know that that data is in cells B2 through B4, so we'll simply take our mouse and choose B2 through B4, and there's our function created for us, equals max with the argument B2. The colon means through, so B2 through B4, and we'll press enter. So our maximum number is 230. Now let's use a function to find the smallest number. D8 should be the active cell. You'll click the drop down arrow. Because we want to find the smallest number, we'll want to use the min function. So go ahead and click min. Now notice that it's looking above for the arguments. We're going to have to change that. We're not looking right above for the arguments. We'll go ahead and select, again, just like we did in the first function, B2 through B4. And here's our function, equals min, in parentheses, our arguments B2 through B4. And then we'll press enter. Wonderful. Now you're getting the idea about how easy it is to work with functions and to use the AutoSum button. D9 is now your active cell. Let's use the AutoSum button to find the average number. Click the drop-down arrow, click on average. Remember, the arguments need to be changed. We want the arguments to be B2 through B4. So take your mouse, select B2 through B4, and once your function displays as equals average, in parentheses B2 through B4, you will press enter. Now notice that our average number has 4 decimal places. When you take Excel 1 Part 2, you'll learn how to format numbers if that is something that you would want to change. Thank you for participating in Excel 1 Part 1. You now know how to enter data and manage that data, and how to create simple formulas using functions. Remember that the course can always be reviewed until you feel very comfortable with this information before you continue on to the next section. Thank you again, and we hope to see you again in a My Recovery Works computer course.